It's the night of June 5th. British soldiers have been forming up in a brigade group of 2 battalions. They're nervous. Officers and sergeants are walking between the ranks, calming men, checking equipment, talking to old veterans, calming young ones. Behind that comes the rasp of whetstones on bayonets. And what every soldier knows, it's the time of hurry up and wait. But this is not June 5th, 1944, leading into June 6th and the invasion of France, Operation Overlord. This is June 5th and 6th, 1813, and the Battle of Stoney Creek. Where I am is Burlington Heights, and the British Army had been retreating from the Niagara region to this location, but it's not their final location. They want to get to Kingston, which is east of here, quite a ways. But they have a problem, and the problem is there's an American army just over 11 kilometers or 7 miles down this road, well within strike distance of British forces here. Burlington Heights, however, is a strong defensive position. The British could fight here, but it has a weakness. And the weakness is by the shore of Lake Ontario, which is just over this way, runs a road that bypasses Burlington Heights and would take anyone into the village of Burlington and the old Joseph Brant homestead, effectively cutting off Burlington Heights. The American Army outnumbers the British considerably. There are 2 infantry brigades with cavalry and artillery. They're commanded by General Chandler and General Winder, his second in command. They're tough, they're aggressive, but they're green, but enthusiastic. And they've been winning fights all the way from the Niagara region to this point. What the British need to do is buy time. They need to get the Americans off their back so they can make that next sprint to the village of York, modern-day Toronto. And in order to do that, on the night of June 5th, they plan what would be known to us in modern parlance as a large-scale commando raid. It's not intended to defeat the Americans decisively or strategically. It's simply to buy the British time, to rock the Americans back, give them a bloody nose, so the British can get away. And Stoney Creek is just that way. And on the night of June 5th, this point right here is where Brigadier General Vincent formed the 49th and the 89th Afoot to give the Americans that bloody nose. Let's go have a look and go and visit a battlefield in Stoney Creek. I'm in the town of Stoney Creek, which is now part of the city of Hamilton. This cenotaph was built at the turn of the 19th century, about 1913, to commemorate the dead from both armies that fought here on June 6th, 1813. It is also the position, roughly, of what is known as Towson's Battery, which was commanded by Major Towson. And Towson's Battery and the rest of the American Army was encamped along King Street in Stoney Creek, that direction behind me. And the main battlefield is this way, right at the crossroads down there. Along King Street were camped the American brigades that were commanded by Brigadier Generals Chandler and Winder. They were somewhat disorganized. It had been a hard march. They'd been trying to capture the British. Their rear guard, their vanguard had been sniping back and forth at one another. But on the night of June 5th and 6th, the Americans were camped here. William Chandler's tent was just behind me, and the British are just 11 kilometers or 7 miles down this road. The Americans had no idea what the British were planning. All they knew is that they were going to catch them within a day or two and force them into a decisive action. And this is the problem that the British had. Burlington Heights, while it is defensively strong, is strategically weak because it can be easily cut off. There's a road that goes towards Lake Ontario, and there's a road at the time that runs along Lake Ontario and bypasses Burlington Heights completely. And if the Americans can get one of their brigades to the village of Burlington at the old Joseph Brant homestead, they can effectively cut off Brigadier General Vincent and his army. And Vincent will then have only one option, and that is to surrender, because he's out of supplies, his men are exhausted. So the battle here that the British are planning is a spoiling attack. They don't want to defeat the Americans strategically. They simply want to rock them back on their heels and buy time. As I said, it's a commando raid, nothing more. Over here, and we'll pass that, is the Gage House. It's owned by the Gage family. It had been taken over as American Army headquarters for the night. The British marched down King Street. At the crossroads, the Americans have placed their cooking fires, and the rest of their brigades are stretched out along this road. The problem is, neither Chandler or Winder know exactly where their regiments are. All they know is everybody's been left to camp higgledy-piggledy. In the early morning hours of June 6th, the British marched down King Street, overcome the advanced pickets of the Americans and kill them all, and march straight at the American camp. Any soldier will tell you the first casualty of any battle is the plan. And for the British, things begin to go to hell in a handcart immediately. Their soldiers have been told to take the gunflints out of their muskets. This is going to be cold steel work. They want to get into the Americans, but it's the American cooking fires that throw them off. And as a result, the Americans are given well and good warning just as the British break into their charge. Regiments deploy along Stoney Creek, and the British deploy on either side of the road, both regiments, and promptly run into a wall of fire. Towson's battery begins to fire canister and grape shot into them. Regiments that are aligned Stoney Creek fire volleys into them. The British are stunned, rocked back. Soldiers put gunflints in their muskets, and they come on again. And again, and again. And each time, they get driven back. But they keep at it. Command and control begin to break down. Officers and NCOs become casualties. And in the middle of this chaos, Major Penderleith walks up to a British sergeant and says, "We have to take those guns." Towson's battery has 4 artillery pieces here, firing canister and grape. The sergeant looks at Penderleith and goes, "All right." And they charge. And Penderleith, leading a scratch force of 30 guys, seizes Towson's battery. Any gunners who do not surrender are killed immediately. Now what? William Chandler's tent is just behind Towson's battery, over this way. He comes walking out to find out what's going on and promptly gets captured. Short time later, Brigadier General Winder rides up on his horse and he goes into the bag. The head of the snake is effectively cut off. Problem is, the snake doesn't know it, and the snake's fighting back hard. Down the road at rear of column, the 2nd U.S. Dragoons get into the saddle, draw sabers, and come thundering down King Street. American soldiers, thinking those are British Dragoons, begin firing volleys of musketry into them. The Dragoons react, and it's a blue-on-blue fight. And that cavalry charge completely collapses. The British are in a mess. Brigadier General Vincent, the British force commander, who was not in command of the attack, is lost, gone. Nobody can find him. And at this moment, the regiments on the left of Towson's battery, the American regiments, begin to realize Towson's battery has ceased firing. And they begin to look to find out what's going on. And they see British troops amongst the guns. The regimental company commander of the flank company of the 1st American Regiment, lined up along Stoney Creek, begins to wheel his company in what's known as a left backwards wheel so that he can bring musket fire onto Towson's battery and charge it to recapture the guns. And it's at this point that Major Penderleith says, "Time to get out of Dodge." They hook drag ropes to 2 of the American guns, take 66 prisoners, including Chandler and Winder, and head back to Burlington Heights. The British Army completely collapses. They retreat back to Burlington Heights. There's pandemonium in the British camp. Vincent is eventually found. He's brought into camp by a First Nations warrior. He's minus his horse, his hat, his sword. Nobody knows what's happened to him, and that's a question he does not answer for the rest of his life. The Americans, the 3rd commanding officer of the American Army, and forgive me, I've forgotten his name, in the morning calls a council of war of his senior officers to get their advice as to what to do. They want to attack the British. He listens to them, weighs his options, and promptly retreats back to 40 Mile Creek. The British on Burlington Heights are in a panic. They're packing up as fast as they can when word is brought to them. The Americans are leaving. They send scouts out, led by Lieutenant Fitzgibbon. They enter the town, the Americans are gone, and there are piles of surplus equipment the Americans have dumped in piles, burning. They wanted to retreat fast. That's the sign of a defeated army. The British reoccupy the village of Stoney Creek. And things on the Great Lakes have changed. Up until this point, the American Navy under Commodore Chauncey have commanded the Lake Ontario. Governor General Prevost led a naval force with the new Royal Navy commander, who's commanding the Navy on the Great Lakes. They attack Sackett's Harbor. It again is simply a large-scale commando raid. He wants to destroy the port facilities and either burn or capture Chauncey's new warship. The British attack Sackett's Harbor, and the Americans, in panic, burn their own port facilities and Chauncey's new warship. The American Navy is at the western end of Lake Ontario. When they get word that the British have attacked Sackett's Harbor, they go racing back. And 4 days later, Commodore Chauncey comes to a burning ruin. He refuses to leave port unless the Army can guarantee the safety of his port facilities. And for 2 months, tactical and strategic control of Lake Ontario switches to the British. This allows Governor General Prevost to push reinforcements and supplies to Burlington Heights, and will eventually lead to the recapture of the Niagara region, Fort George, and Fort Erie in December of 1813. A new general is placed in command in Upper Canada. He also becomes the lieutenant governor. Lieutenant General Drummond. He was born in Canada. He is aggressive. He orders the capture of Fort Niagara, which the British do in late December. He then burns every town from Fort Niagara to Tonawanda Creek in New York in retaliation for the burning of Newark, the town of York, modern-day Toronto, and the communities in the Niagara region. This war is getting nasty. Let's go look at the Gage House. It's kind of cool. The house up here is the Gage House, and it was owned by the Gage family for quite a long time after the battle. In fact, they're the family that buried most of the bodies, both British and American, over by that cenotaph. And for a number of years afterwards, remains were found and reinterred. This house is the last witness to the Battle of Stoney Creek, which, to be completely honest with you, on a tactical level, was a loss for the British, and they did lose tactically very badly. On a strategic level, however, they won, because this action forced the Americans to retreat back to 40 Mile Creek and eventually back to the Niagara region. 40 Mile Creek, by the way, is modern-day Grimsby. This is a really cool house. The Niagara region is full of interesting places. A lot of them have connections with the War of 1812, and a lot don't. But it's a fascinating area to go through. But it's places like these that have stories to tell. And they tell them in their architecture and in the histories that they leave behind. There's one story about the Gage family. I don't know how true it is, but it wouldn't surprise me. The Americans were in such a hurry to leave that one of the things they left behind, which they had stashed in the Gage house, is the Army cash box with the pay for the 2 brigades that were chasing the British. The story is the Gage family suddenly came into a lot of money because the Americans never recovered their cash box. Now, to be honest, I don't know how true that is, but it wouldn't surprise me. It would not surprise me in the slightest. Today, the battlefield at Stoney Creek is a park which people can come and enjoy. And once a year, historic reenactors come here to reenact the Battle of Stoney Creek. I've taken part in that as a reenactor. But standing beside the Gage house, you would never know it that in 1813, on the night of the 6th of June, this was a bloody battlefield. Ontario is full of stories like this. Many of them have historic plaques, and there's one here to the battle. You should wander around, go visit, have a read of these plaques, because they will connect you with the past. Just remember, in your wanderings around, keep walking with a camera. Until next time, cheers.